Bobby Wrinkle. I want to welcome you to Evening Upstairs at your library. In the 1930s, Paducah native and musicologist Mary Wheeler began a journey documenting and studying the songs of former Roustabouts who worked along the packet boats of the Ohio River Valley during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Wheeler provided a glimpse into the life and times of these fascinating individuals. We appreciate tonight's presenter, Nathan Lynn, and library staff's diligence in researching, documenting, archiving, and digitizing, as well as bringing awareness to the valuable work of Miss Mary Wheeler. Tonight's speaker, Nathan Lynn, is Special Collections Librarian. He's a Heath High School, Paducah Community College, and Murray State University graduate. He's an honorable Kentucky Colonel, a standing board member of the Kentucky Oral History Commission, and a musician, a founding member of the bands Bon and the Mash and Wheelhouse Rousters, as well as a member of Solid Rocket Boosters. Let's welcome our presenter, Nathan Lynn, as he presents Mary Wheeler and the Ohio River Roustabouts.
Thanks, Bobby. That was quite an introduction. Hope I can live up to all those things. Well, welcome, you guys. It's been a long journey to get to this evening. We here at the library have spent hours and hours researching Mary and the work that she did, and we're happy to be here tonight to show you what we've been working on. Tonight is my 3-year anniversary. I started working at the library 3 years ago today, so this is a great way to celebrate that. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what we do in special collections here, we are the archives for Western Kentucky and McCracken County. We have genealogical help for you. We have Ancestry.com available here. We have Paducah newspapers. We have yearbooks. If you want to see your picture from when you were younger, you can always come look that up here in the library. We have city directories, and we also have closed archives. And within the closed archives, we have other sub-collections like the Irvin Cobb collection, the Paul Thwitchell collection. We just acquired Roth Funeral Home records, and numerous other collections, but most importantly what we're here to talk about tonight is the Mary Guthrie Wheeler collection, which is probably the most important collection, or one of the most important collections that we house here and can offer for patrons to look at and learn from. Over the last year, we have started digitizing some of these collections, and you can see our digital website here. So far, we've digitized a number of collections. The reason for us doing this is twofold. We want to preserve documents because paper crumbles and it's not going to be here forever. So if we scan these items, then they're preserved digitally, and when someone comes in to look at them, or if they want to look at them online, they don't have to handle them. The second reason for us digitizing is for people from across the world to be able to view these items. And when we were choosing things to digitize, this was one of the collections we thought would reach worldwide, because here we have not only a great piece of African American history, we have a piece of women's liberation history, we have music, and most importantly to us as Paducans, we have river history, and that's the reason this city is here. So this collection is our premier kickoff, and you're going to be hearing more about it hopefully in the press coming up. So let me tell you a little bit about what the Mary Wheeler collection itself offers. It's an original private collection comprising of scrapbooks, letters, manuscripts, theses, photographs, and awards that Miss Mary Wheeler herself saved during her lifetime. The bulk of the collection pertains to Mary's life and studies of the former Roustabouts and chambermaids who had worked upon the packet boats during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These were predominantly African Americans. They worked hard, often for $1 a day, and to lighten this workload, they sang songs. And so this collection has those songs in it that Mary collected. This collection is probably the world's largest collection of inland river music, and one of the last untouched collections of true American folk music that we have here in America. To understand how the collection came about, we've got to think about a couple of things. One, most importantly, is the rivers, and that's why Paducah is located here. You have the confluence of so many rivers coming together within a short distance of each other. Two, the Paducah Marine Ways, which set up shop here and not only built a lot of steamboats, but also refurbished a number of steamboats. And with that, you had the wharf boat. So this was a hub for people working along the rivers, and that included, importantly, the African-American laborers who worked so hard on these boats. And the musical expression that came from these folks is a huge part of this collection. But most importantly is Miss Mary Wheeler herself, and she saw a piece of history fading and thought, someone better preserve this or it's going to go away. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mary Wheeler, she was born to Charles K. and Mary Kirkpatrick Guthrie Wheeler on April 1st, that's April Fool's Day, 1892, and the Wheeler home stood right here on the block where the library sits. The Wheeler home was built by Mary's grandfather, Guthrie, and it's set on the far end where next to the Paducah Sun. There was 3 lots here. Then you had the Terrells, and then you had the Rickeys, I believe, on this end of the library. So it's interesting that Mary's collection came back here and is preserved on the lot where she was raised. She grew up and spent her childhood going to the river, and we can hear this in Mary's oral history, which we'll listen to here in a little bit. You can read about it in her books. She loved the river culture, and she loved living here. She also talks about riding horses to Lonoke on Saturdays. They used to ride out to Lonoke, and that was quite a big deal. She went to New Orleans in 1904 for the christening of the U.S. Paducah. She attended that with her father, so I think that was probably her first big outing. And while she was living here, she attended Longfellow School, which was right here, within a block or two, I believe. She also attended Dorian Private School, which was, let me get my bearings here, on the block, this block here, where I think it's Gary's dentist office is. And then she went to Washington High for a number of years, if any of you all remember Washington High. Then she moved, before she graduated Washington High, she moved to New York and went to private school known as the Gardeners Boarding School. And this was around, she was probably 17 when she did this. She lived there and studied, and then she took off to Europe with the Cuyler family and traveled Europe for a year or so, and then came back to New York and studied singing under private teachers for a couple of years. Then she moved home, and eventually she would go to Toul, France during World War I. She was stationed there with the Women's Overseas League. And I believe the Market House Museum has Mary's service uniform there on display. If you ever get over to the Market House, you can view that. She received a Medal of French Gratitude for her service there in France during World War I. And when she returned home, she went to teach at the Lucy Cobb Institute in Georgia. She taught there for a number of years, and then she moved to Hyndman, Kentucky. Does anyone know where Hyndman is? Whitesburg, the Hyndman Settlement School. And Mary taught at the Hyndman Settlement School there for 1 year. She rode in on horseback, and she had been trained classically in singing. She had sung in concertos. But she went to teach at the Hyndman Settlement School, and here she heard mountain music, and she thought, I need to be collecting this music. So she started writing this music down, and she later would publish these into a book. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I say this to also say that while she was there, the children loved her so much that one of the families made her a dulcimer, and we are fortunate enough to have that dulcimer here with us tonight. Thanks to a couple of members from the family who I would like to recognize, Miss Jane Rudder, and I would like to also recognize Julie and Carl. Thank you so much for bringing this up here tonight. We really appreciate that. And Wheeler, thanks for being here. The one thing I've learned about Mary's family is they are great Paducah people, and they do things like this. They come out and they bring this piece of Paducah and American history for us to view tonight. So thank you guys for doing that. When she got done teaching at Hyman Settlement School, she came back to Paducah and she started teaching at PJC. She taught a couple classes, and at the same time she started studying for Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. And she would eventually receive her degree from the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music as a musicologist, and she would start teaching history of music. And it's during the early 30s that she starts thinking about the Roustabouts. And I don't know this for sure, but the way I picture it, she had been in Hyman, and she had heard all this mountain music and this folk music of Kentucky, and she comes home, and I'm sure she was longing and thinking, where is our folk music of the rivers? And somewhere in there she had to think about the Roustabouts, who had sang on the boats when she was a child. And she thought, I've got to do something about this. So she set out working on her thesis. And she set out originally to write a whole history of American music, but that was quite ambitious. And eventually she would record a history of American music, just a smaller portion. So she continues to study the Roustabouts. She goes out and she will hear about a former Roustabout, someone who worked on a steamboat, and she will go to their house. Sometimes she traveled as far, she traveled to Carsville, she traveled to Hickman. The majority of her work was done here in Paducah, but she did travel along the rivers. And she would go to the houses and the shacks and the shanties that these folks were living in, and she would ask them if they knew any Roustabout songs, if they used to work. A lot of them did not want to sing. A lot of them had found religion, and they thought that the Roustabout songs were devil's music, and they did not want to perform them. Some of them were happy to sing. They would continue to work, often gardening. There's some pictures on our site of a gentleman named Cliff who's hoeing, and she talks about him while he was singing while he was doing this. She would hear these songs. They would sing. Now, granted, these are former Roustabouts. They had learned these songs years ago while working on the river, but they would sing, and she would hear them, and she would hurriedly write down all the lyrics, and she would remember the melody in her head, and then she would rush back here to her loft apartment, and she would play the melody out on her piano to make sure she had it right in her head, and she would write that down. And she collected song after song after song. She would have the melody and the words there. She would write down who gave this song to her. And at the same time, she took a gentleman by the name of Dub Beasley with her, Walter Beasley Jr. Anybody familiar with this fine man? He was a great Paducan, and he went out and took pictures along with Mary, and they took pictures of the folks that she was interviewing. And thankfully, we have a lot of those pictures that we're going to see later. In 1937, Mary releases her first book, and you would think she had been working on her dissertation. She would be focusing on that, but it wasn't. She released Kentucky Mountain Songs in 1937 while she's studying the river songs, but that's usually how it goes as an author. You have to release something while you're working on something else. So we have a number of these books here for you to look at. The same year, she submitted her dissertation, and it was finished. It was entitled Ohio River Folk Songs of the Packet Boat Era. When this is done, she moved to Buena Vista, Virginia to teach at the Southern Seminary. So she finished all this and got a book out, and she was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to go somewhere for a while. She went to the Southern Seminary and taught, and then she moved back home and started teaching at PJC again. She starts soliciting to try to get a book published of her work of Roustabout songs, and she didn't have luck for a while, but eventually her second book, Roustabout Songs, would be published in 1939, and it contains 10 songs arranged by William Reddick. He did the piano arrangement, and I found in Mary's notes that he actually received 2/3 of the royalties, and she received 1/3 of the royalties for that originally. It has a foreword by Mr. Irvin Cobb, and I will read the first paragraph of that here. It says, "Two very talented younger friends of mine made this book. I have known them since their childhood, and as they grew up, I took pride, as the rest of our fellow townsmen did, in their achievements." At that time period, Irvin Cobb was a superstar, and for him to write a foreword for Mary Wheeler to this was a big thing. I don't know how well Irvin Cobb and her knew each other, but if Irvin Cobb wrote a foreword for one of my books, I would be pretty happy about that. After this book is released, it's only 10 songs, and Mary was thinking, I want my whole dissertation printed. She kept shopping it around, and she couldn't seem to find anybody to pick it up. World War II has started, so this is becoming harder and harder, but she keeps researching. And during this time period, she starts researching riverboats more and the Paducah Marine Ways. She makes friends with Frederick Way Jr. Frederick Way Jr. is the guru for steamboat history. He wrote numerous books. The most important probably is Way's Packet Boat Directory, and it is an encyclopedia of packet boats. And she starts corresponding with Mary Green of Green Line Steamers and the Lee Line, and all these river folks trying to get more history to add to her thesis, because her thesis was mainly songs, but she knew it had to have some more substance to get it published. She keeps doing this, and finally, in 1940, she tells Dean Matheson here at PJC that she doesn't want to teach right now. She's going to focus on her book, which I admire for a woman in 1940 to say, yeah, you know what, I would rather do research right now and work on my book than deal with teaching. In 1943, she learns that her book is going to be published. At the same time, her mother passes away. I should mention this. The month after she graduated college in 1933, Charles, her father, passed away. So it seems like some bad things came as soon as good things were come for Mary. But she persevered nonetheless. Her third book, Steamboating Days, which we have copies downstairs that you can check out if you would like. We also have copies in special collections that you can view. This book was released, finally. She received 10-cent royalty for the first 1,500 copies, 12.5 cents for the second 1,500, and 15 cents if it were to sell over 3,000 copies. It was released December 8th of 1944. It received major reviews, but Mary did not seem to be worried about that. Once again, the same month it came out, she moved to Coral Gables, Florida, and started helping in the war effort. She helped with wounded soldiers coming in. So the same week that her book came out, she took off again. Little repetition here. She comes back home in 1950, and they sell the house here on Jefferson Street. It's eventually turned into a parking lot, and if you would like to ever listen to Mary's oral history, which is online, she was not very impressed with that, but she says, so is the demise of all great architecture. It turns into a parking lot. Her book, Steamboating Days, it received rave reviews. She had write-ups in the Louisville Courier, the Memphis Commercial Appeal, the Christian Science Monitor, New York Times, Cincinnati Star, Chicago Sun. It goes on and on. Cyril Clemens made her honorary member of the Mark Twain Society. She's mentioned in the Waterways Journal. She becomes friends with all these great river people. She also became friends with Sarah Gertrude Knott, who you might not be familiar with, but Sarah Gertrude Knott was from Paducah, and she started the National Folk Music Festival, and she is a pretty big ordeal in the music world. And she asked Mary to come perform these songs multiple times, but Mary always had something else going on. She didn't seem to really care about that. She became friends with the Lomaxes. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lomaxes. They went out and did field recordings during the early 20th century. They went out and recorded people in southern Appalachia. They did Texas cowboy songs. And Alan Lomax actually wrote Mary Wheeler in 1938. Sorry, my daughter is waving out there. in 1938, Alan Lomax wrote Mary and said, "I urge you to let me send you an electronic recording device so you can record these roustabouts." And for some reason, I don't have Mary's response. I have the letter Alan Lomax wrote her, but Mary did not do this. Instead, I don't know if she thought, "Oh, I'm a classically trained musician. I can write this out. I don't need an electronic device." She did not take this opportunity, but nonetheless, she wrote out the material, and that's just as important for collecting it. Her songs were sang by a number of people worldwide, but the one I want to focus on today, most importantly, is Miss Bertha Wenzel. And did any of you folks hear Miss Bertha sing these songs? Bertha used to sing these songs. She would dress to part like a Southern belle. And last week I was on eBay searching, as I'm paid to do here at the library, to find Paducah things. And this popped up. And this is Folk Songs of the River, collected by Mary Wheeler, sung by Bertha Wenzel, and accompanied by Bill Small, who many of you might have known too. And it says on here, I didn't know this when I bought it, it says, "Sent by Mary Wheeler, 2435 Jefferson Street, Paducah, Kentucky, May of 1971, to Captain Way," which is Frederick Way Jr., who I was saying was the steamboat captain that's so legendary. So this was Captain Frederick Way's copy. It came out of his estate sometime. So thankful to get that back here at the library. You're welcome to look at any of this stuff tonight after we're done speaking. There's a great picture of Bertha on here as well you might want to see. And that has been digitized, I believe. Wheeler did that, and we have a copy of that here at the library. We have one copy you can check out. There's another in special collections that you can listen to anytime. So we do have that preserved here where people can come and listen to that music if they would like. It's of interesting note, Bertha Wenzel performed these songs in numerous places. She performed at the National Folk Festival. She performed in St. Petersburg. She performed at the Fulton Banana Festival. But something I found in my research of Mary's items was this newspaper clipping from the National Observer, June 3rd, 1963, featuring an article entitled "Festival of Folk Music, a Time for Sittin', Listenin', and Reverie," written by well-known gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson, in which he notes, "A Negro choir from Richmond, Virginia sang spirituals, and Bertha Wenzel from Paducah, looking like Scarlett O'Hara in a floor-length dress and a blue bonnet with ribbons down to her waist, sang a song about a lawless character, and one, 'I'm working my way back home.'" I don't know if you all are familiar with Hunter S. Thompson, but that's pretty strange that he reported on Miss Bertha. As I mentioned, after the Wheeler home was torn down, Mary moved to Jefferson Street, and she lived there until her passing in 1979. She was very active in the community, especially at Grace Episcopal Church. She visited the women's club. She did singing. She taught piano. And her home there is still standing on Jefferson Street. It's hard to express how important this lady is to our community because she did so many different things. Not only did she break the boundaries of what women were doing at the time, she studied everywhere. She was in the Women's Overseas League, but she also recorded a piece of American history that without her would have gone forgotten. She's a true legend of Paducah, and I think her number one goal with her research was probably bringing some awareness to a group of people who were not remembered. These folks were just as much a part of our community as anyone else, and their music tells the stories and trials and turmoils that they went through. When we think about steamboats, we often think about some picturesque floating castle and a southern belle, or we think about riverboat jazz. And while Paducah is related to all these things, we definitely have good-looking women. We have a direct connection to riverboat jazz with Fates Marable, who's from here, and Maddie Matlock. They were great in Dixieland riverboat jazz music. But we don't think about the laborers, and that's something that seems to ring throughout a lot of different eras of our history. The hardworking laborers don't always get remembered for what they do, and Mary has done that with these Roustabouts. This collection is one of a kind, and it is our job here at the library, and hopefully your job as citizens, to make the world more aware of this rich history that we have here. Within this collection, we have the stories of the Roustabouts, the cooks, the chambermaids that worked upon these boats, not only loading cargo, making up tow, lowering the plank, cooking, cleaning, and always singing. And their singing is what documents their lives and this history. It's in some form an oral history that they carried on from worker to worker as they sing. They sing these songs to lighten their load. You're probably familiar with levee working songs where people stomp and they chant back and forth, and that's what these folks were doing. You would have 20 to 30 large African American men singing these songs. You can imagine how powerful that was. And we have those here for you to see. We have those online for you to see, and I'm going to show you those in a minute. The collection actually contains over 140 typed and handwritten songs that Mary transcribed from the interviews with the Roustabouts during the early 20th century. It also contains the scrapbooks, newspaper clippings, and a particular note, the photographs that her and Deb Beasley took that we were talking about earlier. Now, as I mentioned, Mary also taught at Hyman Settlement School, and she wrote down mountain songs while she was there. A lot of her mountain collection was sent to Berea. Before Bertha Winslow passed, she brought Mary's collection in here, and her and Jane decided that it would go here, and her mountain music would go to Berea because that's where her studies were. But we still got caught with about 200 mountain songs that we have in our collection here. So we also have a big collection of mountain music that we have not made available yet. So I would like to talk about what we have made available before I start telling you some specifics on the Roustabouts. When I started here, I was familiar with Mary Wheeler and her work. I had listened to Bertha's album before, and I had seen Steamboating Days. But when Vonnie Shelton, who retired 3 years ago this month, when she showed me Mary's collection, I was a bit overwhelmed because I knew I was going to have to do something with that it did not just need to be sitting in closed archives. If it's sitting there and people don't know we have it, it's, we are here for the public to see this stuff. So it's very important that we make that available. So it was overwhelming to me, and it took me a good while to wrap my head around what I was going to do. It appealed to me in many ways. My family has lived in McCracken County since the 1830s. My father led the singing at Spring Bible Baptist Church, so music is ingrained in me. And I love Paducah history. So all of these things really were calling me, saying, okay, this is the thing that you were put to this library to get out there first. This is what you need to be working on. And since then, I have worked a whole lot on it. The first thing that I had to do was assess the collection. I went through every single document in there and gave it a number and put it in Mylar, put paper in between it. And at the same time I was doing that, I wrote out a finding aid. So let's say that someone came in wanting to find out what date Mary Wheeler's book came out. They can search in a document, and we could go pull that document for them. You would be surprised. People do ask us for things like that. I went a little overboard, and I ended up with a 145-page finding aid by the time I was done. Most museums have like a 10-page finding aid for something like that. But we have it, and it has helped us with the digitization project. So while I was doing a session of the physical project, we started our digital collection. And with the help of Zach Underwood and Matt Yeager and Aaron Williams and Jay and numerous staff people, we have started digitizing. And we thought this collection should be our premier win. It was going to take a while, but we decided this is something, one, that needed to be preserved, and two, people around the world would look at this, not just people in Paducah. So we started scanning photographs, because we couldn't digitize all 7 boxes of stuff. We stuck with photographs and songs, and we did it all in-house here on our Epson scanner, and that didn't take too long. But once you scan something and you have a digital file like this picture of Mary here, you have to create data that goes with it, or what we call metadata. And this takes a little longer. So for each picture that's on our site and each picture that I scanned, not all the pictures we scanned are on our site, maybe for copyright reason, or her thesis is not online because it is part of Cincinnati Conservatory of Music's collection. But for each photograph we scan, we have to name it, we have to put an identification number on it, we have to note if it was black or white, we have to note the physical form of it, as well as the digital form, if it's a JPEG or a TIFF. We have to note the size of it. We have to give a description. We have to note who took it, if there's any copyright, on. And we have to create subject headings. When you go on the internet and you search on Google and something comes up, that's all done by subject searching. And when you search our site here, or if you search for a book on our OPAC computers, it's all done by subject headings. Library of Congress, Sears subject headings. And what that is, let's say, Paducah, -- Kentucky is a subject heading. So if you wanted to find something on Paducah, when you put Paducah in the search, you're going to get these items. And you will get all of Mary's items when you hit Paducah in the search. So that took a little longer to create the metadata, and I was a little bit rushed. The Festival of Riverboats, the 100-year bell of Louisville's anniversary, took place about a month ago, and they asked the library to come and bring the Mary Wheeler collection and display it. So I needed to get this up, so it was a good deadline. And we did. We took these panels and talked to a lot of great people. We actually talked to numerous steamboat captains who knew Mary Wheeler. Captain Doc Hawley, who is a living legend, and he received the River Legend Award last year in Paducah. He came up to me and said, "Oh, I knew Mary Wheeler. When I rode the Delta Queen through Paducah in 1956, she jumped on and rode to Cairo with us." And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I was a little rushed to get this done, but we did get it done nonetheless, and we're very pleased with the digital collection. I know I'm rambling about digitization, and you're probably thinking, we came here to hear about Roustabouts. Well, I'm telling you this because you can look at all this at home. You don't need me to do this. This is being filmed. Folks at home, you can do this on your computer while you're watching this. Or you can go home tonight. Feel free to take one of these flyers that we have. This has the direct link to the collection. And you can look at these photographs. And I'm going to use the site to show you a little bit about the Roustabouts that lived here in Paducah. So let's look at some pictures, since I've been rambling on and on, which I tend to do. This is a picture of Mary here, was taken, I think, well, I can tell you, right here in our metadata, it says 1936. So this was taken right when she was doing her research. And you see here, these are other items in the corner that we did a search for Mary Wheeler in our box. And these are other items that are associated with Mary. Here is one of her cards. I just thought that was neat. Had to digitize that, obviously, because I'm a little obsessed. Here's another picture of Mary. She looks very scholarly. Let's see what else comes up. This is very interesting. This is a picture of Mary's loft. This is the Wheeler home that's set on this block. and this is the loft. And at one time, a gentleman named Tom, who was a stableman, lived up here. And Mary talks about him in her oral history. He's also, I believe he gave her a couple of her songs. I'm not 100% certain, but the man on the furthest display, his name is Tom Wall, who's got his head leaned over by, he's holding on to a mule, you can't tell that. I believe that he lived in this place for a while. I can't be not 100% for sure, but I'm pretty certain. But what I wanted to show you was, do you see what's hanging right here? That's her dulcimer that's right over here. Isn't that cool? She also has her spinning wheel and a number of family portraits here. So Mary, I told you she would rush home. She would write down the songs as they were singing them, and then she would rush home. Well, this is where she rushed to. And I found this in her scrapbook. And here's another picture of the loft of the Wheeler house that's set here. I have to note that Mary had like 10 scrapbooks. She kept everything. She has all of her lesson plans for her teaching. We have boxes of lesson plans. But within her scrapbooks, there was one large scrapbook, and it's about yay big and about yay thick. And it has not been digitized because it is so fragile. I had a consultant come in and say, you're going to have to do that in-house, and you don't have the equipment right now. You're going to have to wait on that. So in the future, hopefully we'll have a collection of Mary Wheeler's personal photographs in her time here on Earth. But I did pull these out to digitize for this. I thought, these need to be on here. So I went in the scrapbook and got these out to show everyone. Then we start finding songs. And we can zoom in here. And this one is entitled, Master Had an Old Gray Mule. And you can go over here and see a description about it, handwritten roustabout type notation, type song, handwritten notation. She always wrote either pentatonic or major scale at the bottom if you're a musician. And she would often write the tempo that the song was supposed to be played at. So we're going to do a search here, and again, you can do this at home anytime. And the first person we're going to search for is Mr. Clayton Riley, and you can just do Clayton. This is Clay Riley. I'm going to find a picture of him and his wife because I like this picture a lot. This is Clayton and Tennessee Riley. And Clayton was born in 1860. According to the Henry County, Tennessee marriage records, he married Tennessee Phillips June 19, 1890. They moved from Paris, Tennessee to Paducah, Kentucky sometime around 1901, and they lived the majority of their lives on the 900 block of Burnett Street here in Paducah. Clayton died of pneumonia in February 26, 1937. Does anyone know what was going on in February of 1937? The flood. And he is buried in Oak Grove Cemetery here in Paducah. Now you're probably thinking, how did he find that out? Well, each one of these pictures might have had one word on it. It might have had a first name or a last name. With the help of Mary's book and her notes and the pictures, I was able to put names to, I would say, 75% of the Roustabouts. There's years of research that could be done on these folks. I just scraped the surface, and what I just did genealogy for him. So I knew this guy's name was Clayton. He went by Clabe Riley, and his wife was Tenny, because Mary talked about it here on page, it says right here, 67, I believe. And so I went on Ancestry and started doing genealogy. I got in our county records and found where these people lived. I used our city directories. Mr. Riley he worked on the river, but he later became a preacher, and he became blind later in life. And Mary had talked to him on the sidewalk and discovered that he was roustabout. He would not sing for Mary the first couple times he went to her house. And she kept going, and finally he started singing Christian songs, and he provided 3 gospel numbers that are here in Mary's book. And I believe when we searched for his name, these other things pulled up here, and this here, these are some notes on Mr. Riley, on the song Red Sea, so you can read a little about where this song came from. It says, the song Red Sea, even though a river song, seems also a spiritual, and this is the only kind that Clabe is willing to remember nowadays. Mary typed that out. Clabe in Tennessee, that's a good name. Only thing would have been better if she'd have been named Kentucky. So let's look up another roustabout. This here is Mr. Sam Barnes. I love this picture. He looks pretty lackadaisical. He doesn't seem to really care what's going on. Sam Barnes is responsible for singing, let's see, what song did he sing? I think Duke See the Pile. And he worked upon the Silver Cloud and the Clyde, which was a boat that we have some pictures of in another collection here at the library. I found information on him both in Mary's book, but I also found his draft registration card. And it says that in 1920 he was living at 911 Washington Street, which would have been 900, with his wife Mary and their son and daughter-in-law. He was working as a riverman on a freight boat as the tie carrier for Air and Lord Tie Company. Are you familiar with Air and Lord Tie Company? Well, let's see what we can find on Air and Lord Tie Company. So we could put Air in here, and we can see this tie company set at the foot of Broadway. To the right, I believe, closer at the end of Tennessee Street, or Washington. And here we have a picture. This is out of Mary's notebook. And you can see men building ties. I'm sorry that the resolution is a little rough on this big screen. It's just hard to get it blown up real high. And then here we see a picture of the Marine Ways Air and Lord Tie Company that Mary took. It's a great photograph. You can see the ways here where they bring the boats up or put them out, either one. Let's see what else we have on Air and Lord. Here is the JS Deluxe being worked on at the Marine Ways. And there's Sam Barnes, who worked there. There's also this picture here. And this is taken, again, from the riverfront here in Paducah. And this shows a number of barges. And you can see here, Air and Lord, Paducah, Kentucky, Marine Ways. And then over here, you see two paddle wheelers. And this is the A.I. Baker. The A.I. Baker was named after a lady from Paducah. Does anyone know who? Well, let's look and see if we can find out who. Let's put in somewhere here. Here's the A.I. Baker on the Marine Ways. And if you scroll down, it says here, I'm going to walk over here so I can read it, that Annie I. Baker worked for the Paducah Marine Ways, for Air and Lord Tie Company. She was a secretary, and she was well thought of in the city. She never married, but she did a lot of great things for the city. And when she passed, this boat was named after her. And it was previously called the Dan O'Sullivan. And again, you can read this online. And I found that out by visiting Frederick Way's encyclopedia. And I have Frederick Way's numbers listed with all these boats on here. You can see right there, it says Way T0014. That's the number that he assigned for the A.I. Baker. So I found all this information out. And then I was visiting the River Discovery Center here in Paducah, and EJ said, "You know, Nathan, there is a monument for the A.I. Baker right here next to Water Street." So I walked around the corner, and sure enough, next time that you are on Kentucky Avenue, there is a monument talking about the A.I. Baker down there. I'm a dork. I thought that was super cool. Wow, man, that's great. So not only are we able to to view the Roustabouts and the songs on here, we're also able to view boats and learn about steamboats. And I'm kind of a steamboat guru. I enjoy steamboats a lot, and Paducah is founded on boat traffic. So what can you say? It seems important to me that we know about boats. So let's look up a boat here. Let's look up the name Fowler. Are any of you familiar with the Fowler family? Well, we have a lot of things here. One, before we show you this boat, I'm going to show you this picture. Does anyone know where the Fowler home stood? Where at?
It's next to the college,
Paducah Junior College.
Yeah.
That's right. When was it torn down? Do you know?
Must have been in the 30s.
In the 30s. It had to be an amazing home because Captain Joe Fowler lived there. And Mary writes that this gentleman worked for the Fowler family. And I'm showing you this picture here because look in the background. Do you guys know what that is? It's the Irvin Cobb Hotel, yeah. I'd like to know where this was taken. I'm not sure, but I'm going to keep looking. So when we search Fowler, we get a number of things that Mary had saved. This here, am I making y'all dizzy? This is Major Littleton Augustus Fowler, known as Captain Gus. And this was one of the Fowler brothers. We can go on over. This is a picture that Saunders Fowler, who later ran the wharf boat here in Paducah, this is a painting of the Paducah riverfront. If anyone knows where this is, I would love to know, just to get a good picture of it. It has the Idlewild pictured right here as well. And I love looking at the buildings. There's the Fowler brothers. Got the post office banking, Louisville Hotel and Saloon, Kentucky State Lottery in 1873. Wow. Candy Vinegar Factory. We got all kinds of cool stuff here. What else? There's the Richmond House. Anyways, I should probably be talking about boats instead of that. You can go off and look at things on here all day. So this is the sternwheeler Dick Fowler, and we can zoom in here, and you can see there's some roustabouts on front here. This was an excursion and a packet boat. A lot of these boats not only were packet boats and were used to carry freight, but they were also excursion boats and were used to carry people and transport them. And you can read in the description here, there's a great history, if I can figure out how to scroll down. Let me go over here and see if I can read it. Sorry. This is the Dick Fowler, a sternwheel packet boat with a wooden hull, 173 by 35. I can't read that for sure. It was built in 1892 in Evansville, Indiana. She was owned by the famous Fowler family of Paducah, who ran her in the Cairo Paducah trade from 1903, I believe, to 1912. Can't read that well. She once beat the Idlewild, which we saw in the other picture, from Cairo to Evansville, and she also beat the Spread Eagle in a race from Paducah to Cairo on April 10th, 1896. Her bell was moved to the W.P. Halliday, and later to the Kentucky and then the St. Louis. The bell now sits on top of, anybody? Who said that? First Christian Church in Paducah, Kentucky. So when I read that, I thought, First Christian Church has moved since then. So I got on the phone and I called First Christian Church and I said, do you guys have a steamboat? And before I get steamboat, she said, Bell? Yes, we do. It's sitting on top of our church. So next time you're over by Audubon Drive, make sure you stop. You can see the bell from the back parking lot there. It's beautiful. And they moved that. And I found out recently that they just did some renovations to the bell. They had to get it. It's on a mechanical bell. If you live in that area, you probably hear it ring. And that is directly off of this boat here. So let's see what else we can look at. Roustabouts, right? That's what we're wanting to look at. I know you guys are probably getting antsy. Let's look up another roustabout. Tom Wall, who is one of my favorites. This is Mr. Tom Wall. This is a great picture. I love that I got to put mules and horses in the subject heading over here. So if anyone is ever looking for mules and subject headings or horses in Paducah, they will get that. They'll be able to find it. According to census records, Tom was born in Tennessee around 1863. He worked as a fireman on the steamboats and lived in Paducah with his wife Florence on the 1200 block of Madison and 1300 block of Monroe. They spent most of their lives. He appears in Steamboating Days on page 25 and 27, as well as 43 and 46. He's responsible for the songs God Dog My Lousy Soul and John Gilbert. Now, if we wanted to know about the John Gilbert, we could put in the John Gilbert. And there's the John Gilbert. I tell you about Tom Wall because John Gilbert is the Boat is the name of the song. It's probably the most well-known Roustabout song that Mary is responsible for collecting. She collected other songs like Alberta Let Your Hair Hang Low and Boatmen Dance, but those songs appear in other areas of American folk music. It's amazing. There's a lot of crossover there. But the John Gilbert did not. And Alan Lomax used this song, and he wrote Mary and asked her if he could use this song and gave her credit. If you look in Alan Lomax's Folk Songs of America, this song about this boat that this gentleman right here sang is in there. Pretty fascinating piece of American history. I know we're running short on time, so I want to skip to a very important chambermaid. Again, there are lots of roustabouts you can look at on here, but this chambermaid's name was Susan. And Susan worked for the Wheeler family when Mary was a child. And I'm going to let Mary tell you this story. This is Mary Wheeler's oral history recording done by John Marshall as part of the Kentucky Oral History Commission's 1976 recordings. And John has just started asking her about growing up in Paducah. And you can listen to this anytime online as well. Let's see.
Now, when you were growing up in Paducah down there on 5th in Kentucky and going to Longfellow and Miss Dorian's and I guess later at Washington High School.
That's her clock.
Did you participate in sort of what are taken to be normal childhood antiques nowadays?
Mm-hmm.
Were there games and socials and play parties and were there dances? Did you ever go down to the river, for instance, to watch the boats come in? What were some of the activities that you engaged in?
Well, we did go down to see the river because there were a lot of boats. We had a cook named Susan, and Susan stayed with us all the time I was growing up. And then she went on the river, as you call it, and she was a maid on the Tennessee, big practice boat called the Tennessee. And when they would land in Paducah, Susan would always come up to see us. And I remember one day she took me down to the boat. And I remember it perfectly how thrilled I was to go through this big boat. And I wrote it down in this book that I changed the names of everybody except Susan and one or two others that I knew wouldn't mind. And I wrote down that little tale about going down to the boat with Susan because I remembered it. Fascinated by it.
She said I was very fascinated by it. But this is Susan here. And Susan appears in the book. She's responsible for the song, Is Your Lamps Gone Out, which is a spiritual song. I think that says a lot, that whole story, that this was her nanny. And later when she was thinking about collecting these songs, she went and found Susan and took pictures of her. There's a great picture here. There's tons of amazing pictures in this collection. But this is Susan at the well. This is her at her well, and it appears in the book. we're running short on time, and I feel like maybe we should sing. Notice I said we should sing. Eh? So let's see if I can find. Oh. This here is Uncle Henry Johnson, and he was 100 years old when Mary interviewed him, and he's responsible for the song, Where Was You Last Night? So I'm not going to sing the chorus, but we're going to sing some verses, and all you have to say is, when I say something, you're going to say, under dem boilers sleeping. When it got cold, the Roustabouts needed a place to sleep, so they would sleep underneath the boilers of the steamboat. Any smart person would. And this song is called Under Dem Boilers Sleeping. That's all you have to say. You ready? Under dem boilers sleeping. Okay. Me. Let's see what we got here. I went down in the valley and I didn't go to stay. Under them boilers sleeping. My soul got happy and I stayed all day. Under them boilers sleeping. Lord, I want to go to heaven and I want to go right. Under them boilers sleeping. I want my garments clean and bright. Under them boilers sleeping. That's pretty good, you guys. So that song was sung as a call and response by the Roustabouts, and this gentleman, Mr. Mark Skinner, sang that for him. Is that right? Uncle Henry Johnson. Thank you, Matt Yeager. I'm glad you're employed here to help me with that. Anyways, I really appreciate you all coming out. We could go on for hours looking at these pictures and the history on here, and that's what I encourage you to do. Please tell your friends. It's available for free and for the world to see. This great collection of so many different branches of American history. We have African American history, we have women's history, we have musical history, and we have river history. And all of these things we should be proud of in our history here. So really, thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them if I can.